Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. It was one of those quiet Saturday mornings that feel almost too gentle to be real. The kind of morning when sunlight slips lazily through the curtains, painting the living room in a soft, golden glow. I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee that had already cooled more than I liked, scrolling through emails on my tablet. The house was still, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional bird chirping outside the window. I wasn't expecting anything unusual that day. The world had been steady, predictable even, and that predictability was comforting. That is, until I heard the soft click of the front door, a sound I knew well because it was always followed by laughter or conversation. But that day, the house felt too empty for either. I looked up, and there he was. My friend, David, standing in the doorway with that mischievous grin of his. I wasn't expecting him. Not today. Not when my week had been so quiet, so uneventful, that I'd convinced myself that surprises were things of the past. Yet there he was, holding a small package wrapped in simple brown paper, tied with a thin ribbon. "Good morning," he said, voice calm but carrying that hint of excitement that always preceded one of his little surprises. He stepped into the kitchen, letting the door close gently behind him. "I hope I didn't startle you." I set my tablet aside, my curiosity piqued, and watched him carefully. David had this way of making even the most mundane moments feel charged, almost sacred. He moved around the kitchen, settling on a chair across from me, placing the package on the table between us. The sunlight caught the edges of the wrapping, highlighting the careful folds he had made, and for a moment, it seemed as if even the simplest brown paper had been transformed into something extraordinary. Brought you something," he said, his grin softening into something warmer, more deliberate. I wanted to do it quietly, no fanfare. Just this. He gestured at the package. There was a pause, a silence filled with anticipation that made my chest tighten in a way I didn't fully understand. I reached for the package, fingers brushing against the coarse paper. It felt unexpectedly solid, almost reassuring. There was a sense of thoughtfulness in the weight of it, as if the contents had been chosen not just carefully but with intention. I looked up at him, and our eyes met. There was an understanding there, subtle and unspoken, that whatever was in that box was more than just a gift. "Open it," he said quietly, leaning back in his chair. "I think you'll like it." I untied the ribbon slowly, savoring the moment, the kind of anticipation that makes time stretch and bend. As I peeled back the paper, I revealed a small, handcrafted photo album. Its leather cover was soft and worn, comforting to the touch. I lifted it out carefully, tracing the embossed lettering on the front with my fingertips. It bore no name, just the faintly elegant initials D&M, and my heart caught in my throat. David leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I made this," he said, almost shyly, which was unlike him. It's all the little things I've noticed about you over the years. Moments, conversations, memories. I thought it might be nice to see them all together." I opened the album, flipping through the pages with a quiet reverence. Each photograph, each note, seemed to capture a fragment of my life that I'd either forgotten or never realized had been observed so keenly. There was the cafe where we'd met that spring afternoon, the little corner table by the window, a snapshot of my garden in full bloom, a handwritten note about a book I had once mentioned loving. Each page was a testament to attention, to connection, to care that felt so rare in the world. That I looked up at him, and for a moment, we just sat there, the room filled with the warmth of shared history. He was watching me, not impatiently, but with a kind of patient expectation, as if he knew the weight of what he had given me and wanted me to feel it fully. "David, this is..." "I don't even know what to say," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, something that felt like gratitude and recognition all at once. He shrugged lightly, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that the small things matter. That someone notices. That someone cares." And in that quiet kitchen, bathed in morning light, I realized just how much those words meant. They carried with them a reassurance I hadn't known I was missing, a reminder that life was richer when shared, when noticed, when honored in its small, everyday ways. We spent the next hour paging through the album together, laughing softly at certain memories, pausing to linger on others. Each turn of the page deepened a connection I had always felt but never fully acknowledged. It was more than a gift, it was an invitation to reflect, to cherish, to feel seen. By the time the sun had climbed higher, filling the room with a warmer glow, I understood something vital. Surprises weren't just about excitement or novelty. They were about care, about intention, about the quiet ways in which people choose to notice and honor each other. And that morning, in the stillness of my kitchen, I felt it more profoundly than I had in years, a simple act of thoughtfulness that left a lasting imprint on my heart. I looked at him, and in that shared silence, I realized that life, with all its routines and predictability, still had room for moments that could take your breath away, not because they were loud or dramatic, but because they were genuine, deliberate, and heartfelt. And that, I knew, was a kind of magic that would stay with me forever. The coffee had gone cold, but it didn't matter. The morning had already warmed my soul in ways I hadn't anticipated. And as I closed the album, holding it against my chest, I knew that this surprise, quiet and thoughtful, had shifted something inside me. Something gentle, yet profound. Something that made me realize just how precious these connections truly are. The memory of that morning, of that simple, unexpected gift, would follow me for years, an enduring reminder that the people who notice, who care, who surprise us in the quietest ways, are the ones who leave the deepest marks. After that morning, things didn't return to the quiet routine I had been used to. Somehow, David's unexpected gift had shifted the air around me, made the ordinary feel lighter, more charged with possibility. I found myself thinking about him in moments I hadn't before, the way he laughed, how he noticed details others seemed to overlook, the gentle patience in his voice when he spoke. I realized, with a little shock, that I had been overlooking just how much our friendship had grown quietly, steadily, almost invisibly over the years. A few days later, he called me, asking if I'd like to go for a walk. It was early afternoon, the kind of brisk spring day that carried the promise of something refreshing, a day when the air smelled of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. I met him at the park, our steps immediately falling into the easy rhythm of old companionship. Yet, even as familiar as this rhythm was, there was something new underneath it, a subtle tension, a delicate curiosity that made the spaces between our words feel electric. We walked in silence for a while, side by side, our hands brushing occasionally. He seemed slightly distracted, and I caught myself studying him, wondering what thoughts were running behind that calm exterior. Eventually, he stopped by a small wooden bench under a spreading oak tree, its branches casting dancing shadows on the path. "Sit with me," he asked softly. I did, and we settled into a quiet corner of the park where the sun filtered through the leaves just enough to warm our faces without being intrusive. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook. It wasn't the photo album this time, but the way he held it, with that same care and intention, made me feel as if it were equally significant. "I've been keeping notes," he admitted, a faint blush touching his cheeks. "Not anything big, just little things, observations, thoughts, memories. I wanted to share some with you." I tilted my head, curious and slightly nervous. There was something intimate in this gesture, the kind that carries the weight of trust. He opened the notebook to a page filled with neat handwriting, small sketches alongside words that spoke of moments we had shared, morning coffees, rainy afternoons, the time we had gotten lost on that hiking trail and laughed until our sides hurt. Reading through it, I felt something stirring deep in me, a mix of warmth, nostalgia, and a realization that these little fragments of life had been noticed, treasured even. "David, this is remarkable," I murmured, my voice catching slightly. "I didn't know you remembered so many details." He smiled, but it wasn't just a smile, it was the kind that carries years of understanding, of shared moments that have shaped both of you. "I notice you," he said quietly. "I've always noticed you, in ways that maybe didn't matter at the time, but they do now. I think it's important to notice the people who matter, before it's too late." There was a pause then, a shared quiet that felt loaded with meaning. The rustling of leaves above us seemed louder, more intimate, as if the world itself was leaning in to witness this exchange. I realized that this moment was less about the notebook, less about the photos or memories, and more about the acknowledgement, the recognition that someone truly sees you. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, the depth of our connection struck me in a way that was both exhilarating and grounding. He wasn't just a friend who brought thoughtful gifts, he was someone who had woven himself into the fabric of my life in quiet, consistent ways. And now, sitting there on a sun-dappled bench, I understood that those threads had become an invisible safety net, one I had never realized I was clinging to until now that we spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the park, talking about everything and nothing, laughing over shared memories and speculating about the future. Each step, each glance, each small gesture carried a new weight, a gentle intensity that made the ordinary extraordinary. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic revelation, it was subtle, like sunlight slowly warming a cold room, but it was powerful all the same. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I felt a quiet contentment settle over me. There was a recognition in my heart that our friendship had deepened into something remarkable, something that could withstand time and change. And yet, there was still a sense of wonder, a feeling that perhaps we had only begun to scratch the surface of what was possible. As we said our goodbyes, I held the notebook close, and he gave me a knowing look, one that seemed to say, "There's more to come." And in that glance, I understood that this experience, this slow unfolding of connection and surprise, was far from over. It had only just begun, and I was ready to follow it wherever it might lead, savoring each quiet, unexpected moment along the way. The memory of that day, the warmth of the afternoon, and the depth of understanding that passed between us lingered with me, like a soft echo in the corners of my mind. And as I walked home under the fading light, I realized that sometimes, the most profound surprises are not loud or dramatic, they are quiet, patient, and filled with care, the kind that shapes the heart in ways you never anticipated. After that afternoon in the park, a quiet shift settled into my days. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, it was subtle, like the way sunlight changes slowly as the season moves from spring to summer. But I felt it in the spaces between my routines, in the way I looked forward to our conversations, and in the little moments when a memory of that day would surface and make me smile without warning. A week later, David invited me to his home for dinner. It was a casual invitation, one he presented as an afterthought, but I sensed the care behind it, the same attention he had put into the photo album and notebook. I arrived to find his kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of roasted vegetables and freshly baked bread. The space was warm, welcoming, and unmistakably him, neat, understated, and yet infused with personality in every corner. We started with wine, sharing stories about our week, laughing over small mishaps and the strange surprises life had thrown our way. And yet, beneath the surface of our casual conversation, there was a quiet tension, a feeling that the air itself was charged with meaning. He had a way of drawing people in, of creating moments that felt both ordinary and profound, and tonight was no exception. After dinner, we moved to the living room, carrying our glasses with us. The evening sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long, gentle shadows across the room. David sat down on the sofa, patting the cushion beside him. I hesitated for a moment before sitting, a subtle awareness of the intimacy that wasn't romantic, but was deeply personal, pressing gently against the boundaries of friendship. "I wanted to show you something," he said, pulling out a small, handcrafted box from a nearby shelf. Inside were letters, handwritten notes, carefully dated and folded. "These are things I've been meaning to share with you," he explained, his voice soft, deliberate. "Thoughts, reflections, memories I've held onto because they mattered. Because you mattered." I opened the first letter with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. His handwriting was neat, the words carefully chosen. Each note reflected an observation, a moment of kindness or insight, a memory we had shared. Some were light-hearted, others tender, and all of them carried a sincerity that touched me deeply. As I read, I realized that this was more than just nostalgia, it was recognition. He had seen me, not only in the big moments of life but in the small ones, the fleeting smiles, the quiet frustrations, the things I often thought went unnoticed. And he had remembered them. Treasured them, even when I looked up, he was watching me, his expression quiet but intent. "I wanted you to know," he said, "that even the smallest gestures, the briefest moments, can have meaning. You've brought meaning into my life, and I wanted to share that with you." Something in me shifted then. I felt an awareness of connection that went beyond simple friendship. It was the kind of understanding that doesn't need words, that exists in shared glances, gentle silences, and the knowing presence of someone who truly sees you. I realized that this exchange, these letters, the care in his actions, had deepened our bond in ways I hadn't anticipated. We spent hours that evening reading, discussing, reflecting. Sometimes we laughed, sometimes we paused in silence, letting the weight of what had been shared settle around us. And when we finally stood to say goodnight, the room felt imbued with a warmth and calm that lingered long after I had left. Walking home, I thought about the nature of surprises and connection. This wasn't about excitement or drama, it was about attention, intention, and care, the quiet, profound acts that shape a friendship, that make life richer, warmer, and more meaningful. David had shown me that surprises could be gentle and enduring, that connection could be deep without needing to be loud, and that true attention could transform ordinary moments into memories that last a lifetime. That night, I understood something essential. The heart remembers the quiet, the thoughtful, the subtle gestures far longer than it remembers the grand or dramatic ones. And in David's care, in his thoughtful surprises, I found a comfort and joy that reminded me how powerful it can be to be truly seen. The memory of that evening stayed with me in the days that followed. Every time I picked up a cup of coffee, every time I passed a familiar street, I found myself recalling the way he had looked at me, the warmth of his words, and the gentle depth of our conversation. The surprise wasn't just the letters or the attention, it was the revelation that true connection, when nurtured, can quietly transform the way you experience life itself. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a sense of gratitude and anticipation. There was a richness in the unfolding of our friendship that I hadn't fully appreciated before, a promise of more moments like this, where the ordinary and the extraordinary intertwined seamlessly. It was a feeling I knew would stay with me, echoing in memory, shaping the way I thought about care, attention, and the quiet magic of shared understanding. After that evening at David's, our friendship took on a new rhythm, one that felt richer, quieter, and more intentional. We still met for coffee, walks, or casual chats, but now there was an underlying depth to every encounter, a recognition of the care, attention, and thoughtfulness that had quietly grown between us over time. It was a comfort unlike any I had experienced before, a sense that someone truly understood me and valued even the small, fleeting aspects of my life. One Sunday, a few weeks later, David invited me to spend the afternoon at a local art exhibit. The gallery was small but intimate, filled with paintings that ranged from the subtle and abstract to vibrant and bold. He suggested we go early, before the crowd arrived, so we could take our time with each piece. I agreed, curious, but I wasn't prepared for the quiet emotional journey that awaited me. As we walked from one painting to another, I realized that he wasn't just sharing art with me, he was sharing his perspective, his thoughts, his attention to detail. He would pause, point out something subtle in a brushstroke, or describe the way a color made him feel, and then ask me what I saw, what I felt. There was a dialogue happening, one that went beyond words into something deeper, a mutual exploration of perception, memory, and emotion. At one point, we stood in front of a painting that depicted a lone figure walking along a foggy shoreline. There was a quiet melancholy to it, yet a gentle hope at the horizon. I felt a tug in my chest, an unexpected resonance with something I had been holding inside. David watched me closely. "You see it too, don't you?" he asked softly. "That sense of longing and possibility, all at once." I nodded, almost breathless. It's capturing something I can't put into words," I said. And in that moment, I realized he understood, in ways few people ever had, the parts of me that remained unspoken, the layers of emotion I rarely shared. We lingered there for several minutes, speaking little, simply absorbing the art and each other's presence. When we finally moved on, I felt a sense of connection that went beyond friendship, beyond shared interests. It was an acknowledgement of our shared humanity, our capacity to notice, to care, to honor the emotions and experiences of another person. After the exhibit, we walked along the river that ran beside the gallery. The afternoon sunlight shimmered across the water, and the gentle sounds of the current made our conversation feel even more personal, intimate in a way that was profoundly comforting. We spoke of memories, of future hopes, of small joys and quiet struggles. Every word seemed intentional, every pause filled with unspoken understanding. By the time we stopped to rest on a bench overlooking the river, I realized that the surprises David had given me, the album, the notebook, the letters, were not just gifts. They were invitations to notice, to reflect, to embrace the depth of connection possible between two people who truly see each other. And through them, I had discovered something about myself, that I craved meaningful connection, that I valued attentiveness and care above all, and that these small, thoughtful gestures could awaken a sense of wonder even in the most familiar of lives. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, David turned to me with a smile that held warmth, familiarity, and something that felt timeless. "I'm glad you came today," he said simply. I smiled back, feeling the weight of the day, the week, the months of our shared moments pressing softly on my heart. "Me too," I said. And in those words was everything: gratitude, recognition, and a profound sense of being seen. Walking home later that evening, I thought about how unexpected surprises could transform life, not through spectacle or drama, but through quiet, consistent attention and care. David had reminded me that true connection isn't always loud, it is subtle, patient, and deliberate, and it lingers long after the moment has passed. I placed my hand over the small photo album he had given me, feeling its soft leather under my fingers, and I smiled at the memory of each carefully chosen note, letter, and gesture. These weren't just mementos, they were expressions of respect, thoughtfulness, and enduring friendship. They had quietly reshaped the way I viewed the world and the people in it, teaching me to notice, to appreciate, and to be present. That night, as I sat quietly in my living room, reflecting on the months that had passed, I understood something deeply. Life's most meaningful surprises often come not in grand events, but in small, intentional acts of care. And the gift of being truly seen, of having your thoughts and experiences recognized and honored, is one of the most profound gifts anyone can give. The memory of David's surprises, his patience, his gentle attentiveness, will stay with me always. They are reminders that the heart remembers the quiet gestures, the thoughtful words, and the care that is offered without expectation. And in that realization, I felt an enduring sense of gratitude and a newfound appreciation for the subtle, yet transformative, power of connection.